Hump Day. Welcome into an all-new edition of Daily Faceoff Live. It is Wednesday, February 26th. We're streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, where we are looking for your inbox questions. Drop those in with the hashtag AskDFO. Frank, 8, 9. How many more days?
9 days. 9 days. 9 days.
9 days. Just a reminder, we're going to be live on deadline day with our marathon stream. Once again, me, Frank, all our friends at Daily Faceoff. Another reminder that this show is brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And Frank, we're going to do an inbox question later. We're going to have Stephen Ellis on the show once again for the next wave. But let's kick off today's show with a little bit of talk about the action last night in the NHL. And listen, you and I have both kind of shared an opinion throughout the year that, maybe this Tampa Bay Lightning team is starting to take a bit of a step back. And what we've seen in the month of February is a damn near perfect run from the Bolts, a 6-game winning streak for Tampa Bay. Last night, it was a stomping of the Edmonton Oilers in Tampa. So let me just ask you the title of the show, Frank. Are the Bolts back? Are they a threat?
I think they're a threat. Here's why. The Eastern Conference is wide open. If you were to tell me that the Tampa Bay Lightning don't have as good of a chance to get out of the East as the Washington Capitals, who lead the conference, I'd say you're crazy. You have to go back to, I'd say, the COVID year and how wide open it was in terms of a path to get to the final that, by the way, the Toronto Maple Leafs had in the North Division in terms of getting there. That's the last time it's been this wide open. I mean, last year we had the reigning Stanley Cup finalist Florida Panthers, who were a team on a mission. That was a significant roadblock. The year before that, even though they lost in round one, the Boston Bruins set the NHL record for points and wins in a season. So you're not looking at that being wide open. That's a kind of juggernaut in the way. And yes, different things happen in the playoffs, but I don't see any one of these teams that's currently in a playoff spot having any sort of leg up over anyone else. I just think it's quite literally, you're talking shades of percentages, 53-47, 51-49, if not a straight up coin flip at 50-50. So I think the Bolts, if Andrei Vasilevsky can get hot, if they can get the defensive play that they need in their own end, led by Victor Hedman, and if their core players, Kucherov, Point, Seravalli, like the same guys that you saw make a big impact for Team Canada at Four Nations. And oh, by the way, stirring pregame speech from John Cooper as captured on camera. They have the makings to be dangerous. They haven't shown it in recent years in the postseason, but they had also kind of been a little bit run down. And if this team is indeed peaking at the right time after a sort of up and down roller coaster type year, win 6, lose 6 at times, well, they've got an opportunity here.
Yeah, they do. You mentioned Andrei Vasilevsky, and that's where I wanted to go first. Like we know he's an absolute difference maker, and when you look at last season, Frank, those numbers were very average, and then he was below 900 in their round one loss in the playoffs as well. And you look at what Vasilevsky's doing this season now, it's a 921 and a 226, and even the shots per game down by half a shot per game. Like they're playing better in front of him, but Andrei Vasilevsky also on the nights they have off, he's capable of winning them hockey games again, which last year, coming off that surgery, didn't get going until, December? He just wasn't the same Andrei Vasilevsky. So maybe that's a bit of a similar story to the rest of the team. You mentioned they were a bit run down. Maybe Andrei Vasilevsky was also a bit run down. But now that he's back and looking like a truly elite goaltender, I wouldn't be comfortable betting against them in any best of 7 series.
Me neither. The Big Cat wasn't a big threat before. And he has been. And that's kind of the amazing part about some of these teams that Tampa has run into the last few years. In some series, Vasilevsky has actually been outplayed. Like there was a stretch where the Leafs got better goaltending in their series against them, and yet Tampa still finds a way to win. So it's been up and down all over the place. But if he's truly at that level again, which you just looked at the numbers, would indicate that he is damn close to it. I mean, you're right. How do you bet against Tampa? I can't bet against the Bolts.
Yeah, they have $5.1 million in projected deadline cap space. Not a lot of assets, though. That's always been the problem in Tampa Bay. No first rounder this year. They do have an extra second rounder, no third rounder. Is
I
a
wouldn't
deadline?
even given the issues that they've had in the postseason in years past and that they've been run down, I would allow this core to stand on its own 2 feet.
I don't hate that either. I was thinking like maybe you do like a second round pick for some middle six help and get some scoring.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do that, great. But how again, we're talking single digit % chances. How much would that player improve their team's chances to win the cup? If not, hang on to it and just let them be as they are. There's no
Yeah.
need to go out and go crazy.
The last thing I just wanted to touch on, and maybe it's because he's fresh in my mind watching him play so well at the Four Nations, but it was not popular. Gensel for Stamkos, that little swap. I know it's a little indirect, but it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it is. And I also think a little bit of an unfair argument because if Stamkos had stayed, would he have played as poorly as he has this year? Probably not.
Yeah, it is a mess in Nashville. We heard Luke Shen yesterday after the game kind of come out and be like, man, I've never been a part of a team like this that just can't score. And speaking of defensemen speaking out, Frank, Seth Jones was doing that last night in Chicago. They lose 2-1 to Utah. The shot attempts were 93 to 39 at all strengths. They had no business being in that game, and that's kind of exactly what Seth Jones was saying afterwards. Let's take a listen.
What needs to change for this ever to, I guess, to right itself?
I don't know. You know, I think we're the exact same team right now as we were at game one. And I think it's pretty evident out there. We haven't made any strides to be a better, more simple hockey team, you know. And it shows, you know, we don't get a lot of wins because of that.
This is kind of an opportunity to gauge that since you started here and now 60 games and almost you're back here again.
Well, this is in almost 4 years of, you know, bottom of the league, so it's not just this year, for me at least.
Frank, what do you make of the frustration from Jones?
So I was thinking about it this morning, and what was ruminating in my brain, I couldn't say it as clearly as Pete Blackburn, our friend, did on Twitter. So take a look at his message and I'll read it for you. He says, my issue with the Seth Jones comments is that at this point, you have to question whether they're selfishly motivated or for the sake of the team. Even if he's not wrong, you probably want to hear that stuff from someone who you're sure is in the fight with you. And I think that's my biggest issue here is that they seem self-serving. So Seth Jones, who hasn't said boo to anyone in years, suddenly comes out of the gate post Four Nations break, guns blazing, voicing in 2 separate interviews that he'd like to be traded and almost hinting that he's turning up the pressure publicly with what he's saying. Then you have a game like last night and you pile on, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, let me get this straight. Guy wants to be traded. Yes. Guy needs to have salary retained in order to be traded because you're not living up to the deal. And 3, hey, you also play half the game. If the team's so bad, why don't you impact the game more? So I kind of smash all those things together and I say, where were you months ago when this team was having the same struggles? We didn't hear you. And now all of a sudden you voice your discontent and now you're going to turn the volume up. It strikes me as disingenuous, and that's totally to not say that he's also not correct. I think he is correct in that this team doesn't have the proper support. And then you get a game like last night where Bedard, Nazar, and Bertuzzi finally played together. And, you know, you've got to, you know, find a way to take steps forward here. The tough part for Chicago is all those ways to take a step forward are playing somewhere else. They're in the AHL, college hockey, or junior still. The Cavalry's still a little bit ways away, and that's hard for Hawks fans to wrap their brains around. But doing this now, why?
And that's kind of where I came out on it too. It's like, again, you said it, it feels so self-serving. And Jones at the end goes, it's been 4 years of sitting in the basement, or however he phrased it. And it's like, I understand that eventually there's a straw that breaks the camel's back moment. But if this would have been game 40 this year before all the trade stuff came out, I maybe would have taken this a little bit more like, hey, there's Seth Jones being a good leader. This just feels like he wants the conversation to be, well, exactly what it is in our chat, Frank. Joe, he wants out. Free him. Get this guy out of here. Like, it feels like Seth Jones wanted this to be the narrative today, and that's why he spoke out the way he did. And if you're the Hawks, you're sitting here and, hey, Pat, maybe we can run the little clip of Connor Bedard sitting in the penalty box, staring off into the distance while we do this, Frank. With this year going the way that it has, do you feel any different about the Hawks and I guess their timeline than maybe you did at the start of the season?
So I was watching this game last night in bed, and my wife, who's not a hockey fan, they came back from break and this was the shot. And I looked at her and I was like, man, I actually kind of feel bad for him. Like, he looks like he's lost. And yeah, it isn't pleasant. And I don't even think Seth Jones and the things that he said are wrong. I just question the timing of it as someone who does want to get out. That, yeah, it's not been a comfortable situation for him either. He gets traded to Chicago, gets this massive deal, and then there's a regime change, and Seth Jones is now stapled to a team that's tearing it down to the studs to rebuild. Not great, but he also could make a bigger impact himself.
Yeah, I think all of that is totally fair. Let's continue along, Frank. And speaking of slumping, the Edmonton Oilers are doing exactly that. 4 straight losses for the Oilers. And in those losses, here's the goals against column: 5, 6, 7, and 4 last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's got the fan base in Edmonton talking about goaltending, and you had a chance to sit down with Stan Bowman for a new edition of Frankly Speaking, and you asked him about the goaltending. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, but before we do that, I just want to be totally clear for context. We had this conversation last Friday on the heels of Four Nation, before this 3-game losing streak that's followed on the back end of Four Nations. That said, the context is key because you do have to allow for people's opinions to change. But I would argue against, for a million reasons why, and we'll talk about it, that the overall philosophy has changed from these comments. Go ahead. Another guy who competes his ass off but has had an up and down season is Stuart Skinner. What have you seen from your goaltending as a whole, not to single him out? How would you evaluate his season?
I thought his October wasn't great. I'm trying to think of guys who did start well. There weren't too many. I think as general art, but we weren't terrible in October. We just weren't at the same level. And I think Stuart was in that category where, but once, I don't know, have his numbers off the top of my head, but since November, it's very impressive. He's done a really good job for us. And same thing with Pick. Calvin Pickett's done a really good job in not as many games. Obviously, Stewart's gotten the majority of the work, but we try to get Pick in there at least once a week so he stays fresh. And I think Pick's won 10 of his last 11 or 12. He's really been good lately too.
So just for clarity, there seemed to be some sort of rumbling out there. Hey, Edmonton might look to improve their goaltending. You're comfortable with what you have?
Yeah, I like the way these guys have played. And, we're part of it is we're going to look at everything to improve our team. So I'm not making any declarations, but I don't view that as something that's holding us back right now.
Frank, 4 games until the deadline for the Oilers. Do you think that there's a chance things get bad enough with the goaltending where Bowman changes that philosophy?
I don't. And the reason for that is I don't think they can. For one, I don't see any true difference makers out there. And 2, given that we are still very unsure about the situation with Evander Kane, they might only have one move in them this deadline. And it may not even be for a big splash. It's dollar in, dollar out if Kane is coming back at some point before the end of the regular season. That means if you're trying to improve your team, you are trading pieces off of your team because that's what you're forced to do cap-wise. Where would goaltending stand on that priority list? What would it be for you? You watch this team more closely than I do.
Yeah, so I wrote a piece today at OilersNation.com, and I agreed that I don't think that goalie is out there. John Gibson is too expensive. There's no guarantee Vemelka is even available. But the one thing that is out there is a better defenseman. And to me, that's where you got to go. The John Klingberg experiment, it's not working. I mean, it's only 7 games in, and you can sit there and say, well, he's knocking off the rust. Maybe in 10, 15 games, he's going to be better. That's not a risk you can take as a Stanley Cup contender. You can't just cross your fingers and go, boy, I hope John Klingberg's a good enough top 4 option. So if I'm in charge in Edmonton, it's a top 4 defenseman. You pay whatever price it is to go get it. If it involves moving out Klingberg or moving out one of the forwards who's making a bit too much money and has been disappointing this year, you got to do it. But like, there's no guarantee the goalie you bring in solves a problem. There is a pretty much guarantee that whatever defenseman you bring in is better than Troy Stecher or John Klingberg. And I spoke with Devin Dubnyk earlier in the week, the former Oilers goalie, and he pinpointed a few of the goals over the weekend. And he went, these look bad on the goalie. And he said, this is because the system in front of them and the players in front of them are playing unpredictable and the goalies can't get set up and play the way they need to. So I am all in. They need a defenseman.
Okay. And I mean, Stan Bowman just basically validated that with his exact last quote, which was, I don't believe the goaltending is what's holding us back.
I think it's the D-man. Yeah. Before we get to Stephen Ellis, and again, full Frankly Speaking interview with Stan Bowman dropping today. Find it wherever you get your podcast from, or watch along right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We're going to get to Stephen Ellis in a second, but quickly, Frank, the percentage game. I got a couple of questions for you. Last night, the New York Rangers, they had an interesting one with the New York Islanders, a game where they win 5-1, but the shot attempts are 82-46 for the Islanders. And the Rangers actually, by the eye test, if you took the scoreboard off the screen and just watched them for the last 3 games, you'd be like, this team does not look good, but they've won 2 of 3, and JT Miller's look great. 9 points in 8 games. I'm curious, percent chance the Rangers make the playoffs, because again, we're at this weird point where like a good 10 games or a bad 10 games, that'll define your season here.
By the way, Mika Zibanejad 11 points in 8 games as well. Kind of amazing. The rebirth that he's had since JT Miller arrived. Percent chance, that was the question, make the playoffs?
Yeah.
I'm going to say 45%.
Okay.
I know that's higher than what many would believe, but it's a pure math thing. And if I'm betting on one team's talent, is it the Rangers or is it the Blue Jackets? Or one, if it could be the Rangers or Sens or Red Wings. I might take one of those teams, but in terms of catching the field, like, it's funny to see the Bruins and the conversation around them. Like, yeah, I watched last night. I understand what happened, but we're talking about teams being not 10 games, 10 days away from being in the driver's seat.
Yeah. And for the Rangers, again, like, the time is now for them to turn it around. And I just sit here and I was like, okay, coming out of the break, this is when they're going to go kind of like pedal to the floor and accelerate ahead of everybody. And then I looked at these games and you dig into the numbers and it's like, okay, they're the same team over and over again. Like, JT Miller looks great. Zibanejad is playing better. But outside of those two, the depth is getting exposed. Adam Fox's injury now raises an eyebrow.
Andre Miller also hurt.
Not great still. I think if I had to give a percent, I'm probably down closer to like 30. And I think it's a bit of a coin flip between like them, the Senators, and maybe I still have the Bruins in there, but maybe not. Next one I got for you, Frank, a name I didn't get to ask you about earlier in the week on your trade targets board was Lawson Krause out in Utah. He had a great game yesterday, 5 shots, scores a goal as well. He's got term, 2 more years at $4.3 million. Percent chance Utah moves on from him. He's number 20 on your board.
They're still right in the thick of it, and they did grind it out last night against the Hawks. And I thought it was really interesting, Krause's post-game comments, which basically said, if I can paraphrase, that he did a lot of soul searching during the Four Nations break and decided that he needed to get back to a shot-first mentality. This is a guy who has a big body that could be an impact player that is too inconsistent for a lot of people's liking. He did see time as a healthy scratch this year. Percentage chance that he gets traded, 18%.
A little lower than I thought. Let's continue along with the show and get to our big segment for the day. The next wave is brought to you by Tim Hortons Canada. Your favorite contest is back. Roll Up to Win is back at Tim Hortons, and that means you could win millions of amazing prizes with just the swipe of a thumb. Imagine turning your routine Tim's run into an unforgettable vacation with Sell-Off Vacations, a $1,000 Rakuten cash prize, or an all-new, all-electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz. Even the simple joy of winning a free coffee or donut can make anyone's day, but you only have until March 23rd. Download the Tim's app today. Rules apply. Canada only. No purchase necessary. Visit the Tim's app for details. Our daily face-off prospect analyst, Stephen Ellis, joining us as he does every week. And Stephen, I want to turn my attention to a piece you're going to be posting in the next 24 hours here over on the site about some under-the-radar rookies, guys who are having great seasons but aren't necessarily in the Calder conversation. And it's an interesting group of players. We'll touch on a few of them, but I guess out of this group that you've identified, which one of these names surprises you the most with how they've played this year?
Yeah, so I didn't want to look at the guys like Dustin Wolf and Macklin Celebrini and Lane Hudson, the guys everyone's been talking about and we've obviously talked about on the show a lot. But I want to talk about Emil Heineman. And this is a player that the last time I talked about him, he got into an accident with a car. So that wasn't exactly
Yeah, he got
ideal.
hit by a car.
Yeah, he was hit by a car. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Words are hard. But you look at him this season, and like that fourth line on Montreal is incredibly impressive. Before the injury, he was on pace for 20 goals, which again, for a fourth liner averaging 11 minutes a night, that's pretty impressive. He did play some games in the NHL last year, but otherwise was a good, not great AHL player. So when we saw him make the team this year, was to bring that energy, to bring this two-way skill, and be very difficult to play against. And we're seeing that with him playing specifically with Jake Evans and Joel Armia. So the fact that he could still potentially get 20 goals is impressive. And if you look at the stats, when the Montreal Canadiens had that early surge in December and January, Heineman was playing great. That fourth line was fantastic. You take Heineman out of the equation, all of a sudden the Montreal Canadiens are no longer in that playoff hunt. It's only been 2 games since he came back, but the Canadiens have looked really good in those 2 games, and that fourth line has looked so hard to play against. So I'm very impressed with Emil Heineman.
Yeah, that's the Marty St. Louis trust line. And kind of an amazing story for Heineman because he's also been traded twice already. And when you see 2 different teams, I guess, give up on him, also impressive that 2 different teams wanted him and saw something. You always wonder, are guys like that going to make it? But when you take a look at some other under the radar rookies, is there anyone whose ceiling you think is significantly higher than others?
I'm looking at Zach Lareau out of Nashville, and that's a guy that I've loved watching since his AAA days. Like, we saw him be this goal-scoring star in the AAA level, and it was a guy that all the QMJHL teams wanted. Gets to the QMJHL, never really exploded offensively. Like, I think his career high was 56 points, but he missed a lot of time due to injuries, and yeah, he also got suspended way too many times. But this is a player that I really like because you can always count on him playing on the edge every game, and he wants to win as much as anyone. But he's also got that offensive skill. Like last year, he had 48 points in 66 games in AHL as a rookie. That's extremely impressive for a player who was never a 100-point guy in the queue. So to go right there and be extremely productive and put up similar numbers that he did in junior was impressive. I think with him, I could see him being a top 6 player for the Predators. And that's because he can kind of complement anyone. You know, yeah, the physicality is what people look for there, but and he is truly a menace. Like he could probably fight the Hulk and win. And that's what I like about him because he's so fearless. But then he's got that skill. He's a great playmaker and he's got a great shot. You mix that all together, he can play with anybody, and I think will look really good.
Yeah, my tagline for him was I had him as one of my breakout stars to start this year, and I thought it was a mistake that the Preds didn't have him make the team from Jump Street. But I said, meet the new player that your team loves to hate, because that's really who he is. And I think he's got this, not just the edge, but the other complementary parts to his game that I think he's going to be a significant impact player for the Preds moving forward. Want to ask you about, since we were talking Montreal Canadiens, let's talk a brother situation. We've talked a lot about impact rookie Lane Hudson, but take a look at this goal from his brother Cole Hudson at BU. Just absolutely ridiculous. Whoop. Crazy. So what is the ceiling? What are we looking at with Cole Hudson, who had, I guess, a tough start to his year and has rebounded pretty significantly?
Yeah, like he was someone who right off the bat had to play some heavy minutes at BU. And I think that was kind of a difficult situation for a player who defensively was always a work in progress. Like he and his brother are not completely identical. For starters, Cole was a little bit bigger at the same age. I'd say a bit better of a skater there too. And then Lane has obviously caught up and is one of the most exciting skaters around. So I'd say just from an overall standpoint, it felt like Cole was the more well-rounded player at this when he got drafted. Then you see the stuff he's doing right now. He's got so much confidence. And I think you can look at the play from the start of USA's World Junior Training Camp all the way to what we're seeing now. Like, it felt like that tournament alone just was so good for his confidence. He's not afraid to make these plays. Like, in the past, we saw him with EJ Emery, who was a really strong defensive player, now a New York Rangers prospect. And Cole Hudson can go on the rush and Emery would take over defensively, and that was kind of their arrangement. But in college, you're going to get burned if you're not a two-way player like that on the point. And I think Hudson just looks just the full part right now. He's looking as close to a full NHL prospect as we've been hoping to see. So I think he's maybe a top 4 defenseman, probably a second pairing defenseman, but a guy you can play on that power play, who can go out there and be just do some of the same things with the puck and the way he skates that his brother does. And I'm very high on him. I was higher on him in the draft than a lot of people. Like I know some outlets had him.
Oh, shocker, because you were on the Lane train as well.
Oh, I'd lean as a top 10 prospect. I do think that defensively, obviously, there's just more options last year, which is why I pushed Cole back. But like in a lot of draft years, to me, I thought Cole Hudson was a top 15 prospect. And yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot, though. Better Washington Capitals brother pick last year, Cole Hudson or Ilya Protas, who has 41 goals in 52 games this year in Windsor, and he's 6'5".
He's playing fantastic. I will also point out that he's got some fantastic guys to play with. I'm more excited for a Cole
and
Hudson.
The OHL is, I mean, it isn't what it once was, to be honest, just with the level of play. Like when you see Nick Lardis putting up 64 goals this year in Brantford, like it's just, I think looking at the points and totals, I look at the OHL differently this year. Fair to say?
To a point, I'd say. I think Lardis is just like nobody exploits open space with the shot the way he does. Like he's like, I remember watching Arthur Kaliev, the guy who he broke the record for goals on the Bulldogs in a single season, and like that guy could not be stopped. Lardis is better at that. But then you look at Kaliev, he hasn't had a great NHL career, so we'll see. But Hudson
you can't have any authentic Lardis talk. He's from Oakville. Come on.
Hey, everyone was telling me I was rating him way too low in his draft year. And I will say, as much as I love the way he shoots the puck, he's not a complete player. I don't know what he's going to be in the NHL. I don't think he's a top line guy.
I forgot to tell you this, also non-related to anything, but I was in a bar in Boston and I ran into some kids during Four Nations and they go, "Hey, we're from Oakville. We know Stephen Ellis." And I was like, "Yes, we got a Stephen Ellis reference in Boston."
Shout out to those guys. Yeah. Oakville, I don't live there anymore, but it all started with John Tavares, Steve Mason, and then all of a sudden you look at Cal Ritchie, future NHL star. He's from Oakville, and he and Nick Lardis grew up playing together.
You are Oakville's finest, Stephen. Appreciate you popping on the show. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much.
Moving along to our daily Faceoff inbox question, #AskDFO. Frank, there's a conversation going on in our YouTube chat between some Detroit fans and some St. Louis fans. It started with Adam going, "AskDFO, does Colton Parayko make sense for Detroit?" J-Rock Blues fan goes, "Parayko isn't moving. I'll say it every single day if I have to." I look at the Blues
J-Rock.
and I hear some of the conversations and I'm like, to me, they're one of those teams that it's like, don't get caught up in the hoopla of the deadline. All these guys have term. Wait until the summer. The markets will be better.
Okay, I'm going to throw one at you that I was thinking about last night. Ryan Suter to Detroit, just as a temporary stopgap, not a forever thing. I know he's 40, but to close out this year and help you get in the playoffs, what do the Wings fans say about that?
Does he still have it, though? I don't know.
Dude, he's been pretty good this year, and Blues fans will tell you that.
I mean, dirt cheap, right? So if you're the thing with Detroit, though, like money's not a problem. I feel like there'd maybe be another team out there who'd go, "Oh, we need someone at $775K." Detroit can go and spend whatever they want cap wise.
But it's also asset acquisition wise. Like if you're bringing him in to be your sixth or your third pair guy, I think he's better than what they're throwing out there right now.
Yeah, and the Wings fans in the chat were saying we just need someone who's better than Justin Hall, which I mean, hey, Suter is probably that.
Yes, he is. I can say that with full confidence.
Let's move along. Daily Bets brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. One play for me tonight, Frank. I'm looking at the Jets plus 190 on the puck line, taking on the Sens. Sens sputtering along. Jets, hottest team in the NHL. No Josh Norris, no Brady Tkachuk, no Shane Pinto. The Sens are missing 3 of their best forwards. The Jets are flying high. Give me Winnipeg puck line plus 190. And that brings us to garbage time for the day, Frank. And let's wrap up the show with a little talk about Ryan Suter. It is tax season, and I'm saying a prayer for Ryan Suter's accountant because this guy has income coming in from every corner of the continent, and your tweet outlined it.
from almost half of the Central Division, for Christ's sake. I mean, look, NHL player tax returns are hundreds of pages because, believe it or not, you actually have to pay taxes in all of the cities that you work in because you worked there for days, and it's significant sometimes in extra city wage tax and things to play. So it is an adventure, but look at this. He's getting 1.43 on the buyout from the Stars, 833,000 from the Wild. And then all these bonuses, which he's chipped away at, and one more game gets him another 600,000 this season, bringing his total comp to this season as a 40-year-old on paper, $775,000 deal to $4.763 million. His career earnings are north of $130 million. And the best part for Ryan Suter is next year, if he doesn't play, he's still going to be bringing in another $2 million and at least 833,000 through 2029. That, my friends, is how you do passive income.
Yeah, that is good stuff from Ryan Suter. $2.2 million to kick your feet up when you're 41 years old after a great NHL career. It's good living for Ryan Suter.
Great businessman as well. He owns the USHL's Madison Capitals, a hotel, a whole bunch of other things. So he's a sharp guy.
All right, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Tomorrow, John Goyens and more. Make sure you hit the subscribe button over on our Daily Faceoff YouTube so you don't miss anything. And tune in tomorrow, noon Eastern. We'll be right back here. Chat with you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.